What if I told you that Iran, yes, the modern nation we know as Iran, holds a crucial place in the Bible's grand narrative of prophecy and world events? When most people think about the Bible, their minds typically go to places like Israel, Egypt, or Babylon. But here's the twist. Iran, known as Persia in biblical times, wasn't just another empire. It was a nation specifically mentioned in biblical prophecy, one destined to play a pivotal role in shaping the future of God's chosen people. Iran's connection to the Bible is far more fascinating than you might think. Its story stretches back to the days of Noah and carries through to the reign of Cyrus the Great. This history intertwines with some of the most significant moments in Scripture. But here's the most astonishing part. God used Persia, a nation led by pagan kings, as a tool to deliver Israel, rebuild the temple, and fulfill prophecies spoken long before they came to pass. In this video, we'll dive deep into the Bible's revelations about the origins of the Iranian people, their rise to power, and the central role they played in both the Old Testament and future prophecies. Prepare to see Iran in a completely new light, not just as a modern-day country, but as a key player in God's unfolding plan for humanity. To uncover Iran's biblical roots, we need to go back to the story of Noah and his descendants. After the Great Flood, Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, became the forefathers of all nations. According to the genealogy in Genesis 10, one of Japheth's sons was Madai, the ancestor of the Medes. Over time, the Medes joined forces with the Persians, laying the foundation for the Medo-Persian Empire, one of the most powerful empires in history. Madai's descendants, known as the Medes, settled in the region that would eventually become modern-day Iran. From the same area, the Persians later emerged and rose to prominence. Both the Medes and Persians shared a common Iranian ancestry. According to the Bible, the ancestors of the Iranian people trace back to Japheth through Madai, placing them in the biblical narrative right from the beginning of post-flood history. This connection ties the Iranian people to one of the oldest genealogies in the Bible and sets the foundation for their important role in the story of God's people. Centuries later, Persia rose to power and became a key player in the biblical narrative. The Medes and Persians formed a historic alliance under the leadership of Cyrus the Great, who established the Achaemenid Empire, also known as the First Persian Empire. At its peak, this vast empire stretched from the Indus River to North Africa, encompassing many regions mentioned in the Bible, including Israel, Babylon, and Egypt. However, Persia's importance wasn't just about its military strength or territorial reach. Its true significance lies in how God used Persia to fulfill his promises to the Israelites. In 586 BC, the Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, conquered Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and exiled the people of Judah. For 70 years, the Israelites remained in Babylonian captivity, just as Jeremiah had prophesied. Then, everything changed with Cyrus the Great. After conquering Babylon in 539 BC, Cyrus issued a decree that allowed the Israelites to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. This moment is recorded in the book of Ezra, where Cyrus proclaims, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth and has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah." Ezra 1-4. Cyrus, a pagan king, was remarkably named by the prophet Isaiah over a century before his time as the one who would fulfill God's plan to restore Israel. Isaiah 44:28, Isaiah 45:1. In one of the most extraordinary moments in biblical history, Persia, a nation outside of God's covenant, became the instrument of God's redemption for his chosen people. This event marked a significant turning point for Israel and underscored Persia's vital role in God's divine plan. Among Persia's most profound contributions to biblical history is the role of Cyrus the Great. In Isaiah 44:28, God calls Cyrus by name more than 150 years before his birth, referring to him as his shepherd, who would carry out his purposes. Even more astonishingly, in Isaiah 45:1, Cyrus is called God's anointed, a title traditionally reserved for the kings of Israel. But how could a foreign pagan king be referred to as God's anointed? The answer lies in God's sovereignty and his ability to use anyone, even those outside his covenant people, to accomplish his will. Cyrus's decree, allowing the Jews to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple, was more than a political decision. It was the fulfillment of prophecy. The prophet Jeremiah had foretold that Israel's Babylonian captivity would last 70 years. Jeremiah 25:1-12, Jeremiah 29:10, and Cyrus's rise to power marked the end of that era. Under the leadership of Zerubbabel and with Cyrus's blessing, the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem became a pivotal step in Israel's restoration. God used Persia not only to overthrow Babylon, the empire that had oppressed Israel, but also to enable Israel's rebirth as a nation. This extraordinary sequence of events served as a powerful reminder to Israel and the world that God's plans transcend the might of any empire, and he can work through the most unexpected individuals to fulfill his purposes. Persia's involvement in biblical history didn't end with Cyrus or the rebuilding of the temple. The Book of Esther provides another powerful example of how God used Persia to protect his people. During the reign of King Xerxes the First, referred to as Ahasuerus in the Bible, a high-ranking official named Haman devised a plan to annihilate the Jews living in the Persian Empire. Driven by hatred, Haman manipulated the king into issuing a decree that threatened the survival of God's people. Through God's providence, a young Jewish woman named Esther rose to the position of queen in Persia. With the encouragement of her uncle Mordecai, Esther courageously took a life-threatening risk by approaching King Xerxes. She revealed her Jewish identity and pleaded for the survival of her people. Mordecai's famous words to Esther, recorded in Esther 4:14, echo with timeless significance. "Who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther's brave intervention led to a dramatic turn of events. Upon discovering Haman's treacherous plot, King Xerxes ordered his execution and issued a new decree allowing the Jews to defend themselves against their enemies. This powerful story, recorded in the Book of Esther, is celebrated annually during the Jewish festival of Purim as a testament to how God worked through Persia, and especially through Queen Esther, to save the Jewish people. The story of Esther is a profound example of divine providence and protection. Persia, though a foreign empire, became an instrument of God's plan to safeguard his people. God's guiding hand is evident throughout the narrative, using the Persian Empire as a stage for the miraculous deliverance of the Jews from destruction. This illustrates how Persia, though not part of Israel's covenant community, played a vital role in the unfolding of God's purpose. Far from being a passive bystander, Persia actively contributed to ensuring the survival of Israel, the nation chosen to bring forth the Messiah. The Bible not only highlights Persia's historical role, but also includes Persia in prophetic visions of future world empires and God's ultimate plan for humanity. One compelling example is found in the book of Daniel. Daniel, a Jewish prophet during the Babylonian exile, served in the royal courts of both the Babylonian and Persian empires. In the book of Daniel, we encounter visions that foretell the rise and fall of empires, including Persia. In Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon dreams of a colossal statue made of various materials, each representing a world empire. The silver chest and arms of the statue in the book of Daniel represent the Medo-Persian Empire, which rose to power after Babylon and became the dominant force in the ancient world. Later, in Daniel 7, the prophet has a vision of four beasts symbolizing four successive empires. The second beast, a bear raised up on one side, represents the Medo-Persian Empire. This image reflects the dual nature of the empire, the combined strength of the Medes and Persians. Known for its vast reach, the empire's expansion, particularly under King Cyrus, significantly altered the course of history. Another prophetic vision involving Persia is found in Daniel 8, where Daniel sees a ram with two horns. One horn represents the Medes, and the other represents the Persians. The ram charges in all directions, conquering extensive territories. However, the vision also includes a goat with a prominent horn, symbolizing Greece and its legendary leader Alexander the Great, who would eventually overthrow the Persian Empire. These visions highlight Persia's central role in God's divine plan, showing that its rise and fall were not mere accidents of history, but part of a greater purpose. Though Greece would eventually replace Persia as the dominant empire, Persia's reign played a pivotal role in fulfilling prophecies from Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. During this time, God's people experienced deliverance and restoration. Even after Persia's fall to Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC, its influence endured, shaping the ancient world during the New Testament era. By the time of Jesus' birth, the Persian Empire, one of the most influential and expansive empires in history, had already been succeeded by the Greek and Roman empires. Yet, despite its fall, the legacy of the Persian Empire continued to echo through history, particularly through its cultural, administrative, and governance systems. Persia's lasting impact is visible not only in the ancient world, but also in the context of biblical history, where its influence plays a significant role in the New Testament narrative. One of the most fascinating connections between Persia and the Bible is the story of the Magi, the wise men who visited the infant Jesus shortly after his birth. This account is found in the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew 2:1-12, where the Magi, having observed an unusual star in the heavens, journeyed from the east to worship the newborn king of the Jews. The fact that these men traveled from the east has led many scholars to believe they came from Persia, or what was known at the time as Parthia. Some even propose that the Magi were Zoroastrian priests, members of an ancient Persian religious tradition that was not only centered around the worship of fire and the dualistic concept of good versus evil, but also placed a strong emphasis on astrology and the interpretation of celestial phenomena. The Magi's journey serves as a profound reminder of the enduring influence of Persian culture and wisdom, even after the fall of the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Persia's ancient scholars, who had long studied the stars and the heavens, were uniquely poised to recognize the celestial sign that heralded the birth of Jesus Christ. This recognition is not merely a historical event. It symbolizes the intermingling of different cultures, religions, and philosophical traditions that contributed to the unfolding of God's plan in the world. The Magi's visit to the newborn king also underscores the idea that God's message was not confined to the Jews alone, but was meant to reach all nations, including those of Persian heritage. The fact that these Persian scholars recognized the star as a divine sign ties back to the deep cultural and intellectual exchanges that had been taking place in the ancient Near East. The Persian Empire, with its vast territories stretching from the Mediterranean to the Indus River, was a crossroads of knowledge and culture. Its influence on astrology, astronomy, and other scientific fields was profound, and Persian scholars played a critical role in the development of ancient astronomical knowledge. This tradition passed down through generations helped shape the understanding of the cosmos not just in Persia, but across the entire ancient world. Moreover, Persia's legacy of cultural and religious tolerance played a pivotal role in shaping the environment in which early Christianity and Judaism thrived. Under the Achaemenid dynasty, Persian rulers such as Cyrus the Great implemented policies that allowed conquered peoples to maintain their own religious practices. This policy was a marked departure from the often brutal policies of other empires that sought to impose their own religious beliefs upon the peoples they conquered. In fact, Cyrus's famous decree allowing the Jews to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem is seen as one of the most significant acts of religious tolerance in ancient history. This openness fostered a climate in which the Jewish communities, particularly in the regions of Persia and Babylon, could continue to develop and flourish. It is in these communities that many scholars believe the Jewish diaspora first began to develop the ideas that would later be foundational to early Christianity. The Persian Empire's tolerance for diverse religious traditions laid the groundwork for the spread of these ideas and their eventual acceptance across the Roman Empire. As Christianity began to spread through the Roman Empire, it encountered both challenges and opportunities. While the Roman Empire was tolerant of various religious practices to some degree, it also sought to impose its own imperial cults. The historical context of the Persian influence on religious tolerance would have shaped the early Christians' experiences as they sought to practice and spread their faith. In light of this historical context, it is also intriguing to consider the potential future role of Persia, or modern-day Iran, in biblical prophecy. Many scholars and theologians have long debated the significance of Persia in the prophetic books of the Old Testament, particularly in relation to the events that are said to unfold in the end times. While Persia may have played a significant role in biblical history in the past, many believe that its role in the future, as foretold by the prophet Ezekiel, will be just as profound. One of the most well-known and often cited prophecies involving Persia appears in Ezekiel 38-39. In these chapters, Ezekiel describes a coalition of nations that will rise up against Israel in the last days. The key player in this prophetic war is Persia, which is identified as a major ally of Gog, the leader of a coalition known as Magog. Together, they will wage a final and climactic battle against Israel, in which the forces of evil will attempt to destroy the nation of Israel. This war, often referred to as the War of Gog and Magog, is considered by many to be a pivotal event in the eschatological timeline. The inclusion of Persia in this prophecy is particularly striking because, for much of history, Persia and Israel have had a complex and sometimes adversarial relationship. However, the prophetic books suggest that in the end times, Persia will play a significant role in the events surrounding Israel's final days. The details in Ezekiel's prophecy are vivid and dramatic, describing a massive invasion of Israel by a coalition of nations, with Persia at the forefront. While many interpretations exist regarding the specifics of this prophecy, the general consensus among scholars is that this conflict represents a final confrontation between the forces of good and evil, with Israel as the focal point. Some theologians interpret this prophecy as a warning to the modern nation of Israel, while others see it as an allegory or symbolic representation of the final battle between good and evil. Regardless of the interpretation, the inclusion of Persia in these end-time prophecies highlights the enduring relevance of Persia in biblical history, not only in the past, but also in the future. This eschatological role of Persia serves as a reminder of the complex and often mysterious ways in which God's plan unfolds. While the Persian Empire may have faded from the world stage long ago, its legacy, both in history and in prophecy, continues to resonate throughout the biblical narrative. Whether through the wisdom of the Magi or the prophetic visions of Ezekiel, Persia's influence is woven into the fabric of biblical history and its future fulfillment. The story of Persia's influence on the Bible offers profound insights into the nature of divine providence, the role of nations in biblical history, and the unfolding of prophecy. From the visit of the Magi to the prophecies in Ezekiel, Persia's cultural, intellectual, and spiritual legacy continues to shape our understanding of God's plan for the world. As we reflect on Persia's historical significance and its role in biblical prophecy, we are reminded that history is not just a series of events, but a tapestry of interconnected stories that reflect God's purpose in the world. The historical narrative of Persia, which is present-day Iran, is deeply intertwined with the biblical story of God's sovereignty and His divine plan. While the precise details and timeline of prophetic events, such as wars involving Persia, may remain a topic of debate among scholars, one undeniable fact stands out. Persia's role, both in ancient history and in biblical prophecy, is of immense spiritual significance, especially in the context of the end times. One of the most notable places where Persia appears in the Bible is in the book of Daniel. Daniel's prophetic visions of the rise and fall of empires serve as a vivid reminder of God's control over the nations of the earth. These prophecies are not just historical accounts, but timeless revelations that point toward the future, including the final culmination of God's eternal plan. In Daniel's visions, he describes a series of empires that would rise and fall throughout history, beginning with the Babylonian Empire. As Daniel interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the statue in the vision represents 4 kingdoms: the head of gold representing Babylon, the chest and arms of silver representing Persia, the belly and thighs of bronze representing Greece, and the legs of iron representing Rome. Each of these empires, powerful and mighty in their own right, would eventually crumble, demonstrating that no matter how great a kingdom or empire appears, it is still within God's sovereign will. When we specifically look at Persia, it is represented as the second kingdom in this sequence, succeeding Babylon and before the rise of Greece. The role of Persia in the Bible is crucial, not only because of its significant historical presence, but also because of its importance in God's unfolding plan for Israel and the world. Persia's involvement in biblical history and prophecy is not merely as a political power, but as a player in God's divine strategy. The rise of Persia brought an end to the Babylonian exile of the Israelites, marking a turning point in Jewish history. It was under King Cyrus the Great of Persia that the Jewish people were allowed to return to their homeland and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem, fulfilling the prophecy found in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah 44:28. God used the Persian Empire, a non-Israelite power, to restore his people to their land. Cyrus's decree, known as the Edict of Cyrus, initiated the return of the Jewish people to Israel, marking a crucial fulfillment of God's promise to his people. This act of restoration was not only a political decision, but a spiritual one, orchestrated by God to ensure that his covenant with Israel remained intact. The story of how a foreign empire, the Persian Empire, would play such a significant role in the restoration of Israel is a testament to the belief that God uses unexpected means to fulfill his promises. The Book of Esther further highlights the role of Persia in protecting the Jewish people. In the story of Esther, the Persian Empire under King Xerxes, Ahasuerus, becomes the backdrop for one of the most dramatic deliverances of the Jewish people in history. Haman, a high-ranking official in the Persian court, sought to annihilate the Jewish people, but through Esther's courage and God's providence, the plan was thwarted, and the Jewish people were saved. This deliverance emphasizes that even in times of peril, God remains sovereign and will protect his people through unforeseen circumstances. While Persia's historical contributions to the Jewish people are significant, its prophetic role in the Bible extends into the future. The prophecies of Daniel, Isaiah, and Ezekiel suggest that Persia, now Iran, will continue to play a significant role in the events leading up to the end times. The relationship between Persia, Iran, and the nation of Israel, particularly in the context of modern geopolitical tensions, has sparked much discussion about the fulfillment of these prophecies. In Daniel 8:20-21, the prophecy specifically mentions the rise of the Persian Empire, indicating its future importance. The conflict between Persia and Israel in the last days is a topic that many biblical scholars believe will be a significant part of the end-time narrative. Iran, as the modern successor to ancient Persia, continues to have a prominent role in the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East, particularly in its opposition to Israel. Isaiah 13 and Ezekiel 38-39 also speak of nations that will rise up against Israel in the end times, and some interpret these passages as referring to Persia's role in the final confrontation. The prophecies suggest that Persia will be one of the key nations involved in the gathering of forces against Israel, but they also point to God's ultimate victory over the enemies of his people. This reinforces the understanding that no empire, no matter how mighty or defiant, can stand against the power and purpose of God. As we look at the current tensions in the Middle East, especially the long-standing hostility between Iran and Israel, it becomes clear that these events are not isolated political conflicts, but are part of a much larger, divine narrative. The Bible reminds us that God is sovereign over all nations and their leaders, and he uses them as instruments to fulfill his ultimate plan. From the rise and fall of empires to the actions of modern-day powers, every kingdom plays a role in God's greater story. Iran, as the modern-day successor to ancient Persia, holds a unique place in the ongoing drama of human history. The political, military, and ideological influence of Iran in the Middle East cannot be overstated. As the country has pursued a greater role in the region and engaged in complex relationships with both Israel and other world powers, its role in biblical prophecy is becoming ever more apparent. Iran's significance in the modern world, particularly its nuclear ambitions and its involvement in regional conflicts, aligns with the idea that Persia's role in the Bible is not confined to ancient history, but extends into the future. As Iran seeks to assert its power and influence, particularly against Israel, it mirrors the biblical prophecies of a coming confrontation between the nations of the world and God's chosen people. The Bible presents Persia's eventual role in end-time prophecy as a reminder that God is in control, even when the political landscape seems chaotic. History is not merely a series of random events. It is the unfolding of God's plan for redemption. The story of Persia is a testament to the fact that no nation is too distant or too powerful to be used by God for his divine purposes. As we consider the present-day tensions between Iran and Israel, it's essential to remember that these events are part of a much larger, divine narrative. The history of Persia and its prophetic role serve as a powerful reminder that God is sovereign over all nations, and that every kingdom and empire, no matter how mighty, is ultimately subject to his will. The rise and fall of nations are not random occurrences, but are intricately woven into the fabric of God's grand design. Persia, both in its ancient form and modern iteration as Iran, serves as a profound example of how God can use even the most unlikely powers to fulfill his purposes. As we watch world events unfold, it's important to view them not just as geopolitical struggles, but as part of the ongoing fulfillment of God's promises. A story that began long ago in the pages of the Bible and will ultimately culminate in the fulfillment of his divine plan for the redemption of humanity.